Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone in the shuttle bay of humanity's first interstellar vessel. Watching through the thick glass viewport as Earth grew smaller and smaller behind her, the blue and green marble that had been home to 8 billion people now looked no bigger than her thumbnail. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and whispered a quiet goodbye. 3 months ago, everything had changed. A massive ship, made of something that looked like living crystal, had appeared in orbit around Earth. It was bigger than any city, bigger than some countries, and it hung in the sky like a second moon. Every television, every radio, every phone on the planet had received the same message at the exact same moment. The message came in every human language, spoken in a voice that sounded neither male nor female, neither human nor machine. You have been noticed. You will attend. That was all. No explanation. No greeting. No threat or promise. Just those 7 words, and then silence. The world's governments had panicked at first. Some wanted to attack the ship. Some wanted to hide. Some wanted to pray. But in the end, they all agreed on one thing. Someone had to go up there and find out what this was about. Someone had to speak for all of humanity. They chose Elena. She was 52 years old. A diplomat who had spent 30 years negotiating peace treaties, trade deals, and ceasefires in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. She spoke 6 languages fluently. She had talked warlords into releasing hostages. She had convinced enemy nations to share water resources. She was calm under pressure, clever with words. She never lost her temper, but nothing in her long career had prepared her for this. The shuttle docked with a gentle thump that Elena felt through her boots. She took a deep breath, checked her uniform one last time, and touched the small Earth flag pin on her collar for luck. Then she walked through the airlock and into the unknown. The inside of the council station was nothing like she had imagined. She had expected something grand, something welcoming, something that showed the power and wisdom of a civilization that could travel between stars. Instead, she found herself in a room that looked very much like a waiting area at a government office. The walls were gray. The lighting was harsh. The chairs were uncomfortable and clearly not designed for human bodies. A creature that looked something like a frog and something like a lizard sat behind a desk. It had 4 eyes that moved independently of each other, and its skin was a dull purple color. It did not look up when Elena approached. "Species?" it asked in a bored voice. A small device on the desk translated its words into English. "Human," Elena said. "From Earth, I received a summons. Number 9771, the creature interrupted. It pressed a button, and a small card came out of a slot in the desk. "Take this. Wait in processing chamber 7. You will be called." Lena took the card. The number 9771 was printed on it in glowing letters. "How long will I have to wait?" The creature finally looked up at her. All 4 of its eyes blinked at different times. "As long as it takes," it said, and then it looked back down at its desk. Clearly finished with her. Processing Chamber 7 was a large room filled with uncomfortable chairs and strange beings. Elena counted at least 3 other species waiting there with her. One looked like a walking plant with flowers for eyes. Another was a cloud of glowing particles that somehow held together in a roughly humanoid shape. The third was a creature covered in thick white fur, with no visible face at all. None of them spoke to her. None of them even looked at her. Elena found a chair that seemed close to her size and sat down. She waited. Hours passed. The harsh lighting never changed. No one brought water or food. No one explained what was happening. The number on her card stayed stubbornly the same. She watched as the other applicants were called, one by one. The plant creature went first. It was gone for about an hour, and when it came back, its flowers had wilted and turned gray. It shuffled past Elena without a word and left through a door marked with symbols. She could not read. The glowing cloud went next. It never came back at all. The furry creature was called after that. It returned looking smaller somehow, as if it had shrunk. Its fur was matted and dull. It made a sound that might have been crying, and then it too left through the exit door. Elena sat in her uncomfortable chair, tried not to think about what might be waiting for her. After 19 hours, her number finally flashed on a screen above the main door. Alina stood up slowly. Her legs were stiff from sitting. Her mouth was dry. She had not slept, had not eaten, had not spoken to another living being since the purple creature at the desk. She understood now that this was intentional. The waiting, the discomfort, the isolation, it was all designed to make her feel small, to make her feel insignificant, to remind her that in this vast galaxy, humanity was nothing special. But Alina Vasquez had not spent 30 years as a diplomat without learning a few things about power games. She recognized this tactic. She had seen it used by dictators and corporate executives and petty bureaucrats all over Earth. It was the same everywhere. Make your opponent tired. Make them grateful just to be seen. Make them forget their own worth. She was tired. She was hungry. She was more alone than she had ever been in her life. But she was not beaten. Not yet. Alina straightened her uniform. She lifted her chin. She touched the Earth flag pin on her collar one more time, thinking of the billions of people counting on her, believing in her, hoping that she could speak for them in a way that mattered. Then she walked toward the massive doors of the council chamber. They opened before her, revealing a space so vast that she could not see the ceiling. Thousands of beings watched from tiered seats that stretched up and up until they disappeared into shadow. At the center of everything was a small platform, lit by a single harsh spotlight. That was where she was meant to stand alone. Small, humble, Alina took her place on the platform and looked up at the assembled representatives of 847 alien species. She did not know yet that they had already decided to reject humanity. She did not know that everything she had endured was simply a formality before a predetermined verdict, but she would learn. And when she did, she would have something to say about it. The council chamber was the largest enclosed space Alina had ever seen. It made the biggest stadiums on Earth look like closets. The ceiling was so far above her that clouds actually formed there, drifting slowly through the artificial atmosphere. Thousands upon thousands of alien beings sat in seats that curved around and upward like the inside of an enormous bowl, and every single one of them was looking down at her. Alina stood on the small platform in the center of it all, bathed in harsh white light while everything around her remained in shadow. She could feel the weight of all those eyes pressing down on her. Some of the beings were huge, the size of elephants or larger. Some were tiny, no bigger than insects, watching from special magnified viewing areas. Some did not have eyes at all, but she could feel them observing her through other senses she could not understand. At the highest point of the chamber, directly in front of her, sat the High Council. 5 beings of different species, each one ancient and powerful and utterly unimpressed by the small human standing before them. In the center was High Arbiter Zixdoran, an insectoid creature that stood nearly 3 meters tall even while seated. Its body was covered in ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished obsidian, and its compound eyes reflected Elena's image back at her in 1,000 tiny copies. The Arbiter raised one clawed limb, and the entire chamber fell silent. "We shall now hear the application of species 9771, the Arbiter announced. Its voice was translated into English through a small device that had been placed in Elena's ear. But she could hear the original sounds as well, a harsh clicking and buzzing that seemed to vibrate in her chest. Designation: Human. Origin world: Earth. 3rd planet of Sol System. Orion Arm. Milky Way Galaxy. A holographic display flickered to life beside Alina, showing Earth rotating slowly in space. Statistics appeared around it in glowing text that she could somehow read, despite the alien symbols. Technological classification: Tier 7, the Arbiter continued. Pre-adequate. Societal classification: fragmented, violent, self-destructive. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Alina kept her face carefully neutral, even as her stomach tightened. Let us review the relevant history of this applicant species. The Arbiter touched a control, and the holographic display changed. Now it showed scenes from human history. Wars, explosions, mushroom clouds rising over destroyed cities. Forests burning. Oceans choked with plastic. Factories belching smoke into darkened skies. In approximately 300,000 standard cycles of existence, the Arbiter narrated in a tone of theatrical disgust. This species has engaged in over 15,000 internal armed conflicts. They have developed weapons capable of rendering their own planet uninhabitable. They have repeatedly polluted their atmosphere, poisoned their water sources, and driven countless other species on their world to extinction. The chamber filled with sounds that Alina recognized as laughter, even though they came in forms she had never heard before. Clicks and whistles and rumbling vibrations that translated to amusement across 100 different biologies. Perhaps most remarkably, the Arbiter continued, and now its tone dripped with condescension. This species achieved spaceflight. Through the use of controlled chemical explosions, they literally strapped themselves to tubes filled with flammable liquid and ignited them. The laughter grew louder. Alina saw beings nudging each other, pointing at her, shaking what passed for heads in disbelief. A being from the lower tiers stood up. It was tall and silver-skinned, elegant in a way that made Alina think of sculptures made from moonlight. She recognized the species from the briefing she had been given. The Veth Hegemony, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the Council. They had been traveling between stars while humans were still learning to make fire. "I have a question for the applicant," the Veth representative said. Its voice was smooth and melodic, but there was a sharp edge beneath the pleasant surface. "Tell me, human, what could your species possibly contribute to this council? We have existed for 4 million years. We have mapped the galaxy. We have mastered sciences your world cannot yet imagine. We have art, philosophy, and technology beyond your comprehension. What do you offer that we do not already possess in abundance?" The question hung in the air. Alina could feel the entire chamber waiting for her answer, waiting for her to stammer and struggle and prove that humanity was exactly as primitive and worthless as they believed. She thought about the plant creature from the waiting room, returning with wilted flowers. She thought about the glowing cloud that had never returned at all. She thought about all the species that had stood on this platform before her. Hoping for acceptance and finding only rejection, she thought about Earth, about the billions of people living their lives, falling in love, raising children, creating art and music and stories, completely unaware that their future was being decided in this chamber. About the astronauts who had walked on the moon, about the scientists who had cured diseases that once killed millions, about the ordinary people who got up every day and tried to make the world a little bit better. The Arbiter leaned forward. "The applicant will respond to the question." Alina looked up at the assembled might of the Galactic Council. She looked at the contempt on their faces, the dismissal in their postures, the absolute certainty that she and her entire species were nothing more than a temporary footnote in galactic history, and then she smiled. Not the diplomatic smile she had been trained to use. Not the careful, calculated expression she wore in difficult negotiations. A real smile, one that reached her eyes and changed her entire face. "May I respond?" "Hi, Arbiter." The insectoid being waved a claw dismissively. "If you must, though I cannot imagine what you could possibly say that would change anything." Alina nodded slowly. She clasped her hands behind her back and stood up a little straighter on her small, lonely platform. "You're right," she said clearly. "About all of it. Every single word." The laughter stopped. The murmurs died away. For the first time since she had entered the chamber, Alina had the complete and undivided attention of every being present. The Arbiter's compound eyes flickered with something that might have been confusion. This was not how applicants usually responded to their condemnation. "We are violent," Alina continued, her voice steady and strong. "We are short-lived. We are divided and difficult and sometimes absolutely terrible to each other. Everything in your report is true. But I wonder, High Arbiter, if your report is complete. I wonder if perhaps there are a few things you might have left out." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "With your permission," she said, "I would like to tell you the rest of the story." The council chamber was utterly silent. Alina could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Thousands of alien beings stared down at her, waiting to see what this small, A fragile creature from an insignificant planet could possibly say that would matter. Hi, Arbiter. Zixthorn made a clicking sound that the translator rendered as a sigh. Very well, human. Speak your piece. Though I must warn you, the Council's time is valuable. Do not waste it. Elena nodded. She took a slow breath, gathering her thoughts. She had given hundreds of speeches in her career. She had addressed presidents and generals and angry crowds. But nothing had ever mattered as much as what she was about to say. You showed images of our wars, she began. 15,000 conflicts in 300,000 years. That number is accurate. We have fought each other over land, over resources, over ideas, over pride. We have created weapons that could destroy everything we have ever built. She paused. But you left out what happened after the wars ended. The holographic display beside her flickered, responding to her words. Images began to appear. Soldiers from opposing armies shaking hands. Cities being rebuilt from rubble. Enemies becoming allies. Treaties being signed. Every single time we have brought ourselves to the edge of destruction, we have pulled back, Elena said. Not always quickly, not always gracefully, but we have always eventually chosen to survive. We have always found a way to put down our weapons and pick up our tools. We build, we rebuild. We refuse to stay broken. You mentioned that we achieved spaceflight through controlled explosions. You found this amusing? Perhaps even foolish? She looked up at the Veth representative who had questioned her earlier. May I ask how your species first reached space? The silver being shifted uncomfortably. We developed gravitational manipulation over a period of 8,000 years. A gradual, careful process of scientific advancement. 8,000 years, Elena repeated. A careful, measured approach. Very sensible. Very safe. She spread her hands. We went from our first powered flight to landing humans on our moon in 66 years, not because we were patient, not because we were careful, but because we could not wait, because we looked up at the sky and we needed to know what was out there so badly that we strapped ourselves to rockets and hoped for the best. She pulled a small rectangular object from her pocket, a smartphone, standard issue for Earth diplomats. She held it up so the chamber could see. This device contains more computing power than the machines we used to land on our moon. We built the first version of this technology less than 50 years ago. It fits in my pocket. It connects me to almost every other human on my planet. And we created it not because we are geniuses, but because we are impatient. Because we are never satisfied. Because we always want more, better, faster. She tossed the phone onto the platform at her feet. It clattered against the hard surface and lay there, small and insignificant. That is what humans are. We are creatures who cannot sit still. We are explorers who would rather die trying to reach a destination than stay home where it is safe. We are builders who start constructing the next thing before the current thing is even finished. The Arbiter made another clicking sound. Impressive rhetoric, but words do not change tier classifications. Words do not make a primitive species suddenly advanced. No, Elena agreed. They do not. But let me ask you something, High Arbiter. How old is this council? The question seemed to catch the insectoid being off guard. The Galactic Council has existed for approximately 4 million standard years. What relevance does this have? For 1 million years, Elena said slowly. And in that time, how much has changed? How many new species have been admitted as full members? How many great discoveries have been made? How many impossible problems have been solved? Silence. Uncomfortable silence. I reviewed your records, Elena continued. They were provided to me as part of the application process. In the last 1 million years, the Council has admitted exactly 0 new species to full membership. 0 major technological breakthroughs have been recorded. 0 fundamental changes to Council policy have been made. You have achieved something remarkable. You have created a civilization so stable, so secure, so perfectly balanced that nothing ever changes. Nothing ever has to change. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many beings as she could. We cannot do that. Humans are not capable of staying the same. We live for 80 years if we are lucky. We do not have time to wait for perfect solutions. We do not have the luxury of spending 8,000 years developing gravitational manipulation. So we make do. We improvise. We take what we have and we push it far beyond what it was designed to do. She pointed up at the assembled council.
Oh.
You see, our short lives is a weakness. And maybe you are right. But our short lives also mean we cannot afford to waste time. They mean every generation has to prove itself. They mean we are always hungry, always striving, always reaching for something more. Alina walked to the edge of her platform and looked up at the High Council directly. You asked what humanity could offer. Here is my answer. We offer stubbornness. We offer creativity born from desperation. We offer the absolute, bone-deep refusal to accept that anything is impossible. Her voice rang through the chamber. We offer a species that has been told it could not survive, could not succeed, could not matter, over and over again throughout our entire history. And every single time, we have proven those predictions wrong. The Arbiter studied her with compound eyes that revealed nothing. A passionate speech. But passion is not a substitute for technological advancement or civilized behavior. Alina smiled again. That same real, genuine smile. You are absolutely correct, High Arbiter. Which is why I have not finished yet. She reached into her diplomatic pouch and pulled out a small crystal that glowed with soft blue light. If the Council will allow me, I have brought a gift. A gesture of good faith from humanity to the galaxy. She placed the crystal on the platform's reader. Holographic displays flickered to life throughout the chamber. And for the first time, Alina heard something she had not expected. She heard gasps. She heard shock. She heard the sound of 847 species suddenly paying very close attention. 12 years ago, Alina said, we found something. Something your records say should not exist. And we figured out how to make it work. The holographic displays that filled the council chamber showed something that made ancient. Beings gasped like frightened children. Complex equations scrolled past, followed by molecular diagrams and energy signatures that pulsed with colors Alina could not name. But she did not need to understand the technical details. She only needed to understand the reaction all around her. Representatives of 847 species were rising from their seats. Some were shouting, some were silent with shock. Some were turning to each other with expressions of disbelief that translated clearly across every biology. The carefully controlled atmosphere of the chamber had shattered completely. High Arbiter. Zixthorn slammed a clawed limb against its podium, producing a sound like thunder. Silence. The council will have order. Slowly, reluctantly, the chamber quieted. But the tension remained thick and electric. Alina could feel it pressing against her skin. Explain this, the Arbiter demanded, pointing at the holographic display. Explain it immediately. Alina nodded calmly, though her heart was racing. 12 years ago, one of our deep space observation stations detected an unusual signal at the edge of our solar system. It was faint, almost lost in the background radiation of space. Most species would have dismissed it as noise. Most of our own scientists wanted to ignore it. She gestured, and the display shifted to show the outer reaches of Earth's solar system. The familiar planets gave way to darkness, and then to something else. A structure, massive and ancient, hidden in the shadows between stars. But humans are curious creatures. Some would say paranoid. We could not let it go. So we sent probes. Then we sent ships. And finally, we sent people. The image zoomed in on the structure. It was enormous, larger than some moons, covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Parts of it were damaged, broken, dark. But other parts still held a faint glow, like embers waiting to be rekindled. We could not read the writing. We could not enter the structure. We could not even determine what it was made of. Our best scientists spent years studying it from the outside, trying to understand. Lena paused. But we are stubborn, as I mentioned. We do not give up easily. And eventually, we found something. A pattern. A sequence. A key. The Veth representative pushed forward to the railing of its tear, silver skin gleaming in the holographic light. "That is a precursor gate," it said, and its voice was barely above a whisper. "That is impossible. The gate network was destroyed 2.3 million years ago. Everyone knows this. The records are clear. Your records say the network was destroyed beyond repair," Alina agreed. "Your records say the war that ended the precursor civilization was so devastating that nothing survived. Your records say that the greatest transportation system ever built, the network that once connected every corner of the galaxy, is gone forever," she smiled. "Your records are wrong." The chamber erupted again. This time, even the Arbiter's demands for order could not quiet the crowd. Alina waited patiently while ancient beings argued and shouted and tried to process what they were seeing. Finally, a semblance of calm returned. The Arbiter leaned forward, compound eyes fixed on Alina with an intensity she had not seen before. "You claim to have found a functioning precursor gate? You claim to have discovered how to activate it? These are extraordinary claims. What proof do you offer?" Alina pointed to the crystal still glowing on the platform's reader. "That crystal contains all of our research. Every observation, every experiment, every theory, and most importantly, it contains the activation sequence. The key to waking up the gate. You expect us to believe that primitives, that Tier 7 creatures who only recently discovered fire in cosmic terms, somehow solved a puzzle that has defeated the greatest minds in the galaxy for millions of years?" "I expect you to verify our findings," Alina said simply. "Send your scientists. Send your experts. Examine every piece of data we have collected. If we are wrong, if we have made a mistake, if this is all some kind of misunderstanding, then you will have lost nothing but a little time." She paused. "Then you will have gained something that your entire civilization gave up on millions of years ago. A chance to reconnect the galaxy. A chance to travel instantly between stars. A chance to undo one of the greatest losses in galactic history." The Veth representative spoke again. "Why? Why share this? If what you say is true, you could have bargained with this information. You could have demanded full membership. You could have held the entire council hostage to your terms. Why give it away?" It was a good question. Alina had asked herself the same thing many times during the long journey from Earth. "Because that is not who we want to be," she said finally. "Humans have spent our entire history fighting over resources, fighting over power, fighting over the fear that there would not be enough for everyone. We came out here hoping to find something better, to be something better." She looked around the chamber, at the thousands of beings who had mocked her, dismissed her, treated her like an inconvenience, to be processed and forgotten. "We could have kept this secret. We could have used it as leverage. That is what you expected us to do, is it not? That is what any sensible species would do." She shook her head. "But we are not sensible. We are human. And we believe, perhaps foolishly, that the best way to make friends is to offer a gift freely, without conditions, without demands." The chamber was quiet now. Not the contemptuous silence of before, but something different, something thoughtful. "You have spent 4 million years maintaining your civilization," Alina continued. "Keeping it stable, keeping it safe, and you have done an extraordinary job. But in all that time, you have stopped reaching. You have stopped hoping for things that seem impossible. You have accepted that some problems cannot be solved." She stood as tall as she could on her small platform. "Humans have not learned that lesson yet. Maybe we never will. We looked at a puzzle that had defeated civilizations far older and wiser than ours, and we refused to believe it was unsolvable. We poked and prodded and experimented and failed and tried again, over and over, until we found an answer." Alina picked up the crystal and held it up so the entire chamber could see. "This is what humanity offers. Not wisdom, not power, not technology that surpasses your own. We offer hope. We offer the stubborn, irrational, completely unreasonable belief that tomorrow can be better than today, that problems have solutions, that giving up is never the right answer." She placed the crystal back on the reader. "Take our gift. Verify it. Use it. Let us help you rebuild what was lost. And perhaps in return, you might consider whether humanity deserves a chance to prove what we can become. The silence that followed Elena's words was unlike anything she had experienced before. It was not the dismissive silence of a crowd waiting for an annoyance to finish speaking. It was not the awkward silence of embarrassment or confusion. It was the deep, thoughtful silence of beings who were reconsidering everything they thought they knew. Hi. Arbiter Zixthorn sat motionless on its throne, compound eyes fixed on the holographic display still glowing with humanity's gift. Around the chamber, representatives who had laughed and mocked were now quiet, studying the data streams with expressions that ranged from doubt to wonder to something that looked almost like hope. Then, from the upper tiers of the chamber, where the newer species sat, where the applicants who had been rejected and the members who had never quite earned full respect made their homes, a single figure stood up. Alina could not identify the species. It was small, covered in iridescent scales that shimmered in the light. It did not speak. It simply stood, facing her, and placed one appendage over what might have been its heart. Another figure stood, then another, then dozens, rising from their seats throughout the margins of the great chamber. Species that remembered their own humiliating applications. Species that had been mocked and dismissed and told they would never amount to anything. Species that had survived anyway. They stood in silence, acknowledging Alina, acknowledging humanity, acknowledging the courage it took to stand alone on that platform and speak truth to the most powerful assembly in the galaxy. The Arbiter watched this display with an expression Alina could not read. Finally, it raised a clawed limb for attention. The Council will reassess to verify the claims presented by the human delegation, it announced. Its voice was different now. The contempt was gone, replaced by something more cautious, more careful. The applicant will be provided with appropriate diplomatic quarters during this process. If the data proves accurate, the Arbiter paused, as if the next words were difficult to say. If the data proves accurate, the Council will have much to discuss, including, perhaps, a reconsideration of certain classifications and procedures. Alina bowed her head respectfully. Thank you, High Arbiter. Humanity is grateful for the Council's consideration. As she was escorted from the chamber, Alina noticed something remarkable. The guards who walked beside her were not treating her like a prisoner or a nuisance. They were treating her like a diplomat, like someone who mattered. The doors of the council chamber closed behind her, and Alina allowed herself a single moment of relief. Her legs were shaking. Her hands were trembling. She had given everything she had, and now all she could do was wait. Ambassador Vasquez. Yes. The voice came from behind her. Alina turned to find the Veth representative approaching, silver skin gleaming in the corridor's softer light. Representative Alina said, straightening her posture. Can I help you? The Veth studied her with eyes that held 1,000 years of experience. I have lived for 11 centuries, it said. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations that seemed eternal crumble into dust. In all that time, I have never seen anything quite like what happened in that chamber today. I hope that is a good thing, Alina said carefully. I am not certain yet. The Veth moved closer, lowering its voice. You realize what you have done? If your data is verified, if the gate can truly be reactivated, you will have changed everything. The balance of power that is held for millions of years, the relationships between species, the very structure of galactic civilization, I know. You've shared it freely. No leverage, no demands, no guarantee of anything in return. The Veth tilted its head. Either your species is very wise or very foolish. Alina thought about her grandmother who had raised her after her parents died. She thought about the old woman's kitchen, filled with the smells of cooking food and the sounds of laughter. She thought about the simple wisdom that had guided her entire life. My grandmother used to say that if you want to make friends, you should bring food to share, Alina said. I figure a galaxy-spanning transportation network is close enough. The Veth made a sound that might have been laughter. It was the first time Alina had heard any member of the council laugh in a way that was not mocking. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman, she was. She also said that people remember how you treat them when you do not have to be kind. When you have power and choose to use it gently, that is what they remember. The Veth was quiet for a long moment. Then it reached out and touched Elena's shoulder. A gesture that somehow felt universal, despite their different biologies. I voted against your species this morning, it admitted. I thought humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to trust. I thought you would use any power you gained to harm others, as you have harmed each other throughout your history. Elena nodded. That was a reasonable concern. Perhaps. But I was wrong about something. I assumed that because you had been violent, you would always be violent. I did not consider that you might be capable of change, of becoming something more than your past. The Veth's eyes held something new. Respect, perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. Today, you showed me something I had forgotten was possible. You showed me hope. It released her shoulder and stepped back. I will be watching your species with great interest, Ambassador Vasquez. I suspect you will continue to surprise us. Elena watched the silver being walk away, disappearing down a corridor that led deeper into the station. Then she turned toward the viewport at the end of the hall and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, impossibly far away and yet somehow still connected to her heart, was Earth. 8 billion people living their lives, falling in love, having children, creating art and music and stories. They did not know yet what had happened here today. They did not know that their future had just changed, but they would learn. And when they did, Elena hoped they would be proud, not just of her, but of themselves. Of all the generations that had come before, of every human who had ever looked up at the stars and refused to accept that they were out of reach, humanity had spoken. And for the first time, the galaxy had listened. Elena touched the Earth flag pin on her collar and smiled. There was so much work still to do. So many challenges still to face. The verification process would take time. The negotiations would be difficult. There would be setbacks and disappointments and moments when everything seemed hopeless, but that was fine. Humans were good at dealing with setbacks. They were good at facing disappointments. They were good at finding hope in moments of darkness and pushing forward even when the odds seemed impossible. That was what made them. Human Elena turned away from the viewport and walked toward her new quarters. Ready to begin the next chapter of humanity's story among the stars? Behind her, through the thick glass, the light of 1 billion distant suns filled the endless darkness of space with promises yet to be kept. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity. But that was exactly as it should be. Some things, after all, were meant to change.